Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /Malicious Compliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, we've got nasty Karen bosses, bad neighbors, scamming Karens, and CEOs, all getting taught lessons they won't forget. The stories are so satisfying today, so sit back, relax, grab a drink, and seriously, try not to shake your heads too hard today. When I was in high school, I used to go to work with my father during the school holidays. He was the manager of a quite large butchery with easily 50 people on the cutting floor alone. I loved it because we would start work at 3 a.m. and work until midday, so I still had time to myself, and on top of that, I got a load of money for a 14-year-old. My job was also easy. I would just help with anything that needed to be done, from packing steaks to mincing meat. With that said, there was one job that I hated more than anything. It was prepping the boxes to hold the packed meat. And here's another note. I didn't work directly for my father. He believed there should be some separation between us, so I reported to a floor supervisor. As I was 14 years old and the boss's son, the guy disliked me immediately. The cutting floor was downstairs and the boxing room was upstairs. Enter Paul, one of my coworkers who was intellectually disabled. Paul was paid very well to stand around and have the boxes prepped for filling. The boxes were shipped in bundles of 200, and all we would do to make them up is open the flattened cardboard, shape it into a box, and tape them. They were then stored in this one room and then dropped through a hole in the floor down to the cutting floor as needed. Normally, it was a couple of stacks at a time. Another thing is Paul was quite slow at making the boxes, so someone would always be sent up to assist, and that person was usually me. I would go up and help for a bit and get a bunch of stacks made and then head back down. Paul would keep it maintained for a while, but he would eventually run out. On the other hand, I was quite fast. There were actually records on the wall with times of who could make a full stack the fastest, and you know who was at the top. Anyways, to the compliance. One normal day, Paul runs out of boxes and I'm sent up there. I spend about 20 minutes getting more boxes made up and then head back down to what I was originally doing. Now, the floor supervisor didn't like that I was done so quickly, and the guy full-blown yelled at me saying, "Stay up there and make boxes until I say to stop. That's an order." I remember him having this stupid smirk on his face, so that's exactly what I did. I stayed up there and I filled up the room, floor to ceiling. And remember, this is an industrial building, so it had super tall walls. I also filled up the hallway outside the room, just leaving enough room to walk through. I then filled up the locker room and even added cardboard partitions to make a false ceiling, so I could stack even more boxes on top of that. I did this over 3 days before the floor supervisor decided that he needed me downstairs. Needless to say, the guy wasn't amused. However, everyone else was. There was never a greater sense of achievement than seeing a bunch of butchers running up a flight of stairs and nearly falling over laughing. Paul was also beside himself because he didn't have to do any work, and for a brief moment, I was a hero. My actions did earn me more work back on the floor, but to this day, I'm still satisfied. What a win-win-win that was. Getting back at a rude boss, getting Paul not only caught up, but also way ahead, and also building a super awesome box fort that, by the way, Paul ended up enjoying so much because OP comments, Paul loved it. I remember he went and attempted to hide and scare people. Unfortunately, I think he forgot that he was a chubby 40-year-old dressed in white overalls, standing in a brown cardboard room. I absolutely love this malicious compliance, guys. So I work customer service at a very popular retail store that basically sells everything from food to electronics to plants. You've all been to this blue hellhole with a smiley face, and I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. So since I work the customer service desk at one of the least respected stores in my city, I pretty much see the scum of the earth daily. Luckily, management had our backs though. I have lots of stories, but this one is fresh from yesterday, so here you go. A Karen comes up to the customer service desk asking if she could get a discount on a pair of shoes because they, quote, look really tattered and bad. There was nothing wrong with the shoes, they just looked like cheap shoes because, well, that's what they were. My one coworker was the one she approached, and not wanting to argue, told her we can give her 10% off, as this is the max discount, even for associates. Well, this Karen gets mad, and she says she doesn't have to pay anything even close to full price for something of such low quality and damaged. The shoes were $14.97, by the way, and she wants them for $5. My coworker explains that that's the best we can really do for her, but she could buy a pair that she thinks looks less tattered. She then says they all look like that because that's how the shoe is supposed to look, and that she wants to speak to a manager because she, quote, deserves to pay less for something so poorly made. At this point, I step in because we were understaffed that night, and I knew the managers were currently dealing with other issues in the back. And in my experience, most people just need to be told by another person the same thing they were told the first time. So I tell the lady that the max discount that anyone's able to give in the store is 10%, and that's only for actually broken items, even for associates. And that if a manager comes up, they'll most likely tell her that she's getting no discount at all. At that, the woman scoffs and she says, "Sure there. I want to speak to them anyways and we'll see. I really want these shoes and they're the only ones in my size and they're tattered. I'm not paying anywhere near full price for these ugly things." I of course tried to tell her again that the managers won't give her a bigger discount, and it'll probably take them 15 to 20 minutes to get to the front. But she tells me, get the manager, and she'll see for herself. So cue malicious compliance. I had originally thought it would be an a-hole tax situation, but it turned out to be way better. So I call for a manager, and like I predicted, it took 25 minutes for them to come to the front. And I guess they weren't very happy about it, presumably since they were in the middle of something else that's more important. At this point, this Karen's already wasted at least 15 minutes of her day trying to haggle with us, and then another 25 minutes waiting here and making faces at me and my coworker as though she had won. I point the manager towards the Karen when she gets there, and they go ask what the issue is. The Karen starts bashing me and my coworker, saying we're horrible at customer service and the customer's always right, blah blah blah. She then says she wants a bigger discount than just 10% because these shoes are broken, she now says. She once again says she doesn't even want to pay close to full price for something such low quality and broken. My manager takes one look at the shoe and tells her they're not broken, and that's just how the shoes look. The Karen continues arguing, saying they're broken, and she deserves a bigger discount. After going in circles, I guess my manager just snapped, and she said, "Okay, well, if you're so sure they're broken, then we can't actually sell them. They have to go through our claims department and get sent back to the company." She then grabs the shoes out of Karen's hands and she puts them in the bin behind her. She then says, "I'm so sorry for your troubles. Is there anything else I can help you with?" The Karen's speechless for a second, and my manager walks away. And that's when the woman starts stuttering to us that she'll take the 10% now. We told her no, and that's when she said she'll even pay full price since they were the last ones in her size. My manager just held her ground and told Karen over and over again that no, we have to send them back to the company since they're, quote, broken. and we can't sell them to anyone. That wouldn't be fair to the customer. The woman eventually lets out a frustrated sigh and she gives up and walks away. My coworker and I have a good laugh, and about 5 minutes later, the woman walks past the desk again and she yells, "I'm never buying a single thing from this store anymore. I'm boycotting you for the rest of my life." I just responded, "Okay, have a great night," and then smiled all cheery while the woman huffed and left. Unfortunately, I'm 99% sure that she'll be back within a week, like every other customer who's never shopping here again. But one can only hope. Yeah, I only wish OP responded with, "Don't threaten me with a good time, Karen." But yeah, jokes aside, don't you just love it when a Karen's plan backfires so hard that even she regrets it in the end? And don't you just love how the manager chose that hill to die on? No ma'am, you clearly said that the shoe, the pair that happened to be the last one in your size, was broken multiple times. So no, you may not buy the shoe anymore, even at full price. Guys, if I were OP, let me tell you, I would not stop smiling after that satisfying moment. And serious kudos to the manager for making that satisfying moment even possible. Like, it's always nice to know when a manager has your back, unlike the boss in this next post. So, I've always been the kind of person to arrive at work/events early. I hate the stress of running late, so I always allow more than enough travel time on my commute to avoid lateness. I always stop for a coffee first thing on my morning commute to work. It was a half-hour drive to my work on the highway, so I like to sip on my coffee and listen to tunes to relax before work. Even though it's only a half-hour commute, I would often leave for work an hour before my start time, just in case there were any unexpected delays. On this one particular day though, there was a massive jam on the highway. Now normally, I get to work 20 to 30 minutes early because of the extra travel time. But this traffic jam was so bad that it made me 6 minutes late for work. My supervisor starts giving me crap for coming in late, but having a cup of coffee. He publicly calls me out in front of other employees saying, "Hey everyone, look at OP. His morning coffee is way more important to him than respecting his coworkers." And seriously, no amount of "I bought the coffee before I knew there was a traffic jam" would get him to stop hassling me, and the guy writes me up for being late. Now, my company had a policy that less than 5 minutes late is okay, but anything more than 5 minutes late means a write-up. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes and 30 seconds or 2 hours late, the punishment was always the same. However, supervisors were given leeway on this, and they were encouraged to not penalize people unless they were consistently late. Me, I was never late. I was always early, but my supervisor decides to punish me anyways. So fast forward a couple of weeks, another delay, and it looks like I'm going to arrive at work about 15 minutes late. So knowing that I'm gonna get written up no matter what, I pull off the highway, find a nice restaurant, and I had a nice long 2-hour breakfast. I show up to work 2.5 hours late, and I got the same write-up that I would have gotten if I had been 15 minutes late. But at least I got to go relax and eat bacon. I still showed up at work early 99% of the time, but every now and then there might be a delay, and that would mean I'm 6 minutes late, or even 10 or 15. Rather than take the penalty for a lousy couple of minutes, each time I would extend the late time a couple of hours, and I would have a nice, long, relaxing breakfast. That's how you beat the system, OP. And seriously, shame on the supervisor for not giving any leeway. Like, I just don't get how people are like that, right? Like, a person who's never ever late, in fact, often shows up early for work, is late one time, and you punish them for it, and you create a petty enemy. I'm just glad to know that OP has those deliciously long breakfasts whenever they're late now. And this person comments, "It reminds me of my senior year in high school. The penalty was the same if you were 1 minute late to first period, or if you missed first period completely. You could be late 3 times in a month, and 4th time, you got assigned to study hall. So 3 times a month, we would skip first period completely, and we would go have a nice breakfast somewhere. And this person writes, at a previous job, one of the guys showed up a couple of minutes late. The owner's daughter was standing next to the time clock. She says, "I'm docking you for a half hour." Well, he turns around and he starts going back outside. She asked what he thought he was doing, and he replied, "If you're not paying me, I'm not working during that time. So I'm gonna go to McDonald's and I'm getting myself breakfast." She never stood by the time clock again. So here's a bit of background. I'm in human resources and I work for a manufacturing company. My hourly guys work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. In June, I got a new manager. Now, I knew she was going to be a problem because she didn't like doing what me, a generalist, and the coordinator did. Essentially, I did recruiting, onboarding, and the generalist did payroll. So a few months after she started, she began complaining how I get there at 7 o'clock and leave at 4. She asked me to change my schedule to come in at 8 o'clock while the coordinator would continue to work 7 to 4. So I'm doing this for a couple of weeks, and she keeps trying to get me to stay later than 5 o'clock, which in my mind, I take a 30-minute lunch. So you're already getting 8.5 hours out of me. After resisting for a while, she begins scheduling meetings for 5:30 or 6 p.m. At this point, I'm irritated, but I'm being passive-aggressive about it. I look at our calendars and I propose a time where we would both be free before 5 p.m. This is how I knew she was just being a jerk. So she has a meeting with me and she tells me that night that she needs to see me more. To which I reply, "Well, you come in around 9:30 a.m. and you stay till 7. What do they need me for?" This is when she admits it's because she doesn't know how to do some things. She says that rather than admitting that she flat out doesn't want to learn. So I tell her I'm happy to teach her what she doesn't know, but just because I'm salaried doesn't mean I get to be worked like a dog with no extra compensation or time off. Which was another thing. She would often get mad about me taking time off. Turns out she was upset because it became very apparent when I wasn't around that she didn't know how to do her job. But I digress. So she says I have to start attending mandatory employee meetings that happen after 5 or 6 p.m. I get tired of arguing and agree. The first time one of these events is coming, I change my schedule. If the event ends at 7 p.m., I would come in at 10:30, so I wasn't working any extra hours. The first few times, she thought I was running late that day. But after a week or two of this happening, she realized it was intentional. Anyway, she gave up, and about a month later, I got a promotion and I transferred to a new site. Within months of my leaving, she was put under a microscope as it became obvious to corporate that she didn't know how to do her job. I also got praised from the HR director, who explained to someone new that my old boss only survived this long because the person who was doing all the work had left. She got fired. Thank you for reading. Again, gotta love when a Karen's plan backfires, guys. Oh, I don't know how to do this, and I don't want to learn, so I'm just gonna make my worker suffer for it. Like seriously, you have to wonder how some people get into the positions they do. But whatever the case, that Karen boss is gone now, and it's nice to know that OP was praised. And this person writes a comment that shares a story and says, "This is a very mild one about a nasty CEO. A while back, my wife and I were buying our house after a few years of rental. There was a delay in the new house being ready, so we moved in with my mom for a few weeks. During that time, I stashed some stuff at work, including bringing in my chair, a very nice Herman Miller that I'd gotten secondhand. The office chairs were old, standard, but not exactly nice. After a few days, I noticed my chair would be in the conference room every morning. No problem, I just wheel it back to my desk. I was working 8 to 4 to avoid traffic, so usually I was in first. The CEO of about 120 people would not arrive until about noon, and they would take later meetings when most of the staff were away. After a few days, the chair kept ending up at his desk. The guy would shoot me a dirty look every morning, but that was it. After a few more days of this back and forth, the CEO's assistant, who was actually a lovely person, approaches me, and they told me that the CEO doesn't think it was appropriate that I had a way nicer chair than him. They told me that people would think that my desk belonged to the CEO, and it was stressing her out, having to basically fight for it every day on his behalf. I told her I understood completely and I would stop fighting over it. I took it out of the office that lunchtime and reclaimed a normal office chair. The next day, she comes over and she asked where the chair was. I then said with an incredibly straight face that I thought since it wasn't appropriate, I just took the chair to my house. She had a super stunned look, but she just kind of ran off. Since I was almost always first in, I always got a parking spot near the building. Pretty much everyone got to walk past my car on the way to the office, and they would see the chair in the back for a few more weeks, since I didn't have enough space to bring it inside my home. However, given his cowardly nature, I never got approached about it ever again. To this day, I'm 100% certain that they thought I was gonna give in and let him have my chair. Instead, I got the joy of telling everyone the honest truth about why my chair was in my car for weeks. Merry late Christmas. So my friends Adam and Belle have a story about one of their neighbors and how he managed to stuff a 5-pound bag of coal in a Karen's stocking this Christmas by using Malicious Compliance. This particular neighbor Tim and his wife Frances would always go overboard on the outdoor decorations every Christmas. There would be lights, garlands, wrought iron reindeer statues, snowflakes, candy canes, a 6-foot-tall Santa statue, a nativity scene, all that stuff. It was, quote, its own brand of charm, according to the neighbors. Unfortunately, earlier this year, Frances suffered a massive stroke and passed away. Tim was devastated, especially as Christmas came closer and closer. Frances's favorite holiday was Christmas. So Tim told the neighbors around Thanksgiving that he wasn't going to decorate the house that year. It was just too painful without Frances there. Everyone was sad, but they did understand. Unfortunately, Karen did not get this memo. It's the week or so after Thanksgiving, and people who haven't put up Christmas decorations are busy doing so. Adam and Belle were walking their dog, Domingo. Tim's out in front of his house getting the mail. Adam and Belle go up with Domingo to see Tim and to say hello. While they're talking, this red minivan pulls into Tim's driveway, and that's when Karen steps out. They've never seen her before, but Tim recognizes her. He says, "Good morning, Karen." The woman goes on and says, "Yeah, hi. So I was wondering if you're gonna put up your Christmas decorations this year." Hearing that, Adam, Belle, and Tim look at each other uncomfortable. Tim tells her, "I'm not gonna put up any decorations this year." Karen said, "And why not?" To which Tim responds, "Christmas reminds me of Frances." Karen says, "Well, what about my kids? They've been looking forward to seeing the houses decorated. And the fact that you're pretty much the only house that isn't decorated makes them really sad. What would Frances want?" Hearing that come out of Karen's mouth, Belle, Adam, and Tim just stared in astonishment. Karen then goes on and says, "We've had a lousy year and we need some cheering up. They've been looking forward to this every year." At that, Tim's looking both angry and brokenhearted. Adam and Belle are ready to tell Karen to go stuff it, but Karen sets a trap for Tim's malicious compliance. Karen then says, "We're going to be here after church on Christmas Eve, and this house better be decorated." And with that, Karen gets back in her minivan and she drives off. Belle looks at Tim, and he's got a malicious smile on his face. Tim says if she wants a decorated house, she's going to get a decorated house. So the weeks pass, and Tim starts getting several packages delivered. He also starts putting things up in the yard, but they're covered with bed sheets, so they look like those Halloween ghosts. He also starts putting lights on the house. There is more lights than usual, but he doesn't turn them on at night. Karen and her minivan don't show up, even though Adam and Belle had alerted everyone in the neighborhood about her. So that said, Christmas Eve rolls around. Adam and Belle are invited to Tim's house for dinner. When they arrive, the curtains are drawn and Tim greets them with a big smile. They settle down and he details his plan, asking for their help. They're laughing at the end of it and they eagerly agree. As they work, Belle notes that he's happier than they've seen him in a while. Tim says it's hopefully gonna get even better. By this point, it's still just light enough that they can see what they're doing, but dark enough that you can't see what's in the yard. They then remove the bed sheets and they laugh at all the decorations that have been set up. There is a nice dinner and they watch a movie. Midway through the movie, Tim's alarm goes off on his cell phone. He pauses the movie, looks at Adam and Belle, and he says, "It's showtime." Everyone bundles up as they head to the sidewalk across the street. It's now pitch black and Tim's house still isn't lit up. There's the usual cars driving through the neighborhood, with Karen's red minivan being at the end of the line. Right on time, Tim says, taking a remote out of his coat pocket. They wait until the red minivan reaches the front, and that's when Tim presses the button. According to Belle, it was like the scene from Christmas Vacation when Griswold's house turns on. There was red, white, and blue lights galore. The yard has eagle statues, stars, flags, banners, a Statue of Liberty, etc. In the windows are lights that look like exploding fireworks. Tim grins and presses another button. All of a sudden, the Star-Spangled Banner begins to belt out through several speakers placed throughout the yard. Adam, Belle, and Tim are laughing as the minivan stops and parks. Karen gets out of the seat and she storms to them saying, "What is that?" She's shrieking, pointing to the house, and she looks like she's about to blow a gasket. Tim says it's a salute to all nations, but mostly America. Don't you like it? Karen shouts, "It's Christmas, you idiot. I wanted you to decorate the house for Christmas." That's when Tim says to her, "Hey, you wanted a decorated house, Karen, but you didn't say what holiday." With that, Karen flips him off and she gets back in the minivan and drives off. Tim turned off the music and lights and they head back inside Tim's house to finish the movie. Tim told Adam and Belle as they were leaving for the night, "I think I'm gonna decorate my house like this every Christmas. Francis would have gotten a kick out of it." I freaking love this malicious compliance so much, guys. And you know what? From reading the post, I thought Tim was gonna set up a string of lights into a shape of a middle finger, but this is way better. Like, you want me to decorate, but for what holiday, Karen? Like, shame on that Karen for that sense of entitlement, though. I don't care if your wife just died. My family had a rough year, and we want to see lights on your house. Seriously, guys, some people's sense of entitlement still baffles me to this day. And with that, we're gonna finish off this episode with one last short holiday post. This person writes, "In many families, when it's time to eat, everyone gathers for the food to be blessed. In these families, it's usually the same few people who always do the blessing. In my family, it's usually my grandmother. She does a normal blessing. And a normal blessing is something along the lines of, 'Dear Lord, thank you for this food. Bless the family gathered here today, and please let everyone drive home safely tonight. Please bless this food for our body's nourishment. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.' You get the gist." It only takes a minute and then everyone chows down. However, at this one big Christmas family and extended family meal, my grandmother had a cold and she didn't want to speak. Everyone asked my father to say the blessing, which he politely declined. They kept pestering him and asking him again and again and again. He said no. Finally, someone just said, "Gary, stop it, just say the blessing." To which my father says, "Okay, fine." In this moment, he hatched his plan, so it would be the very last time he would ever be asked to say the blessing ever again. He began and he said, "Dear Lord, thank you for this delicious looking food. Thank you for the hands that prepared it. Thank you for the farmers who grew this food. Thank you to the ham and its amazing honey glaze. In fact, thank you for the bees that made the honey for the glaze. Thank you, Lord, for the green beans. Please also bless the sweet potatoes, as well as their enticing brown sugar topping." Again, you get the gist. He continued to bless every single thing we had to eat and drink. He even blessed the Coke and the Diet Coke separately. He even blessed the ice in the drinks and the ham bone that flavored the collard greens. All in all, it took a long time, and during his blessing, everyone had to stare at the food and just wait. Some even held in chuckles as they knew what was going on, for it would be very rude to interrupt someone during a prayer. When my dad finally finished and said amen, everyone breathed a sigh of relief because it was finally over and we could now eat. After that, everyone agreed that he would never be asked to bless the food again. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled-people episode, where psycho Karens are at it again, and this one rich smug gets put in his place. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.